Thanks for getting on to the Wednesday edition of Logan's European Outlook. I want to talk a little bit today about the big variation in temperature, very upside down, very atypical of what you would expect at really any time of the year, never mind this time of the year, in terms of the temperature profile across the British Isles. These were the temperatures yesterday. Around about this time, as of recording, we had temperatures between 9 and 12, even 13 Celsius, with a maximum of 15.7 Celsius recorded at Dyce Airport, just the northwest of Aberdeen, while we had temperatures in low single figures across the southern half of the British Isles. And, basically, over the last several hours, what we've seen is those temperatures, of course, dropping like a stone under clear skies, light winds across the south. But as we progressed through the overnight last night, the temperature held, between 9 and 11 Celsius through the majority of the last night. And it's really just today, this morning and this afternoon, that the temperatures have been starting to drop off. And basically what we're going to see is, while we've got, of course, very mild conditions across the north, very cold conditions stuck underneath across the south, what we're going to see is the temperature pendulum just come back to around about equal over the next, really tonight and into tomorrow morning. We're going to start to see the temperatures balancing back out again. But I want to also look back at what has been over the last couple of weeks, because it has been a fascinating pattern. For up here across the north, we were dealing with snowfall, cold temperatures, ice was a major problem, and those memories have just completely disappeared now. You get 2 or 3 days of temperatures 10 to 12 Celsius. Gone is the snow and ice, and it's amazing how quickly you can actually forget what just happened. And I want to kind of almost look back at the last 10 days or so and look at what just took place. So, of course, we'll have to skip back to previous model runs to rewind the clock and see the evolution of where we are. Because I'll tell you one thing, by the way, it has been a cold last 14 days. So the last 2 weeks, particularly so across the south of England, it's been a cold past couple of weeks, and it's been a completely opposite to what we've seen during the first 10 to 14 days of the month. Remember how mild the majority of, the first 15 days of January was across the bulk of England and Wales. Back and forth a wee bit across Scotland, across parts of Northern Ireland as well. But this was the setup that we had. So we had, of course, high pressure to the west, low pressure to the east. We had northerly winds. We had frequent spells of snow, which really started to stack up quite significantly with a good 10, 15 to 20 centimetres of snow quite widely to the north of the central belt, and temperatures at or below freezing for several days. So throughout last work week, we've seen temperatures subdued. Overnight temperatures were down between -8 and -11 Celsius. And then, of course, we've seen the big change took place last weekend. So as we play through this loop here, you can see exactly what took place. Area of high pressure elongated between the Azores and Scandinavia, then kind of became focused across the bulk of England and Wales. And of course, with frontal systems approaching from the west, we squeezed the isobars, we picked up a southwesterly wind, and we wiped out the cold across the northern half of the British Isles, just simply by triggering more in the way of a west to southwest and then southwest to south wind that just kind of dragged in tremendous amounts of warm air. So we essentially warmed the column, and that warmth then dropped down to the surface, wiped out the snow and ice, of course, that had built up throughout the course of last week. But what happened was that we held on to the cold across this stagnant, clear, calm column of air across the southern half of the British Isles. So therefore we held on to the cold. In fact, we enhanced the cold actually under the clear skies and light winds. Well, of course, radiational cooling took place, and therefore we've seen some very cold nights. Temperatures down to minus 9.8 at Santon Downham in Suffolk. I believe minus 9.3 possibly at Benson in Oxfordshire. And of course, there was the trigger, there was the development of that large temperature contrast. Southwesterly winds, and of course, with the Föhn effect, those winds blowing across the hills of western and northern Scotland, as they crossed over those hills, the downslope compressed and they allowed the temperature to warm up. And 14 degrees was a fairly widespread temperature where you were downwind, downstream of hills. So, of course, as those winds crossed over those hills and they descended, you warmed the air up, and that's why we're seeing a temperature close to 16 Celsius to the northwest of Aberdeen during the course of yesterday. But of course, that then allowed temperatures, the cold overnight temperatures that we've seen across the south of England, with that cap, with that kind of block within the mid levels of the atmosphere, that cold air had nowhere to go. So basically, we developed temperature inversion, is what you call it. So we've got the mixing across the north. Remember that the air mass was warming across the entire British Isles here. But what took place is that we've seen an inversion take place that has kept the south of England colder than normal, really from about the early to middle portion of last week, right the way through till now. And only now are we starting to see the change taking place, and I'll show you in just a second why. Normal conditions, warmer air moves in and it sinks right down to the surface. But when you've got that area of high pressure with a lack of wind to mix that warm air from aloft down to the surface, what you get is an inversion that takes place. So the warm air becomes trapped with cold air, or should I say really, you've got actually the cold air at the surface that becomes trapped under that warm blanket of air at 850 millibars. So at 5,000 feet, the air mass may be, plus 3 to plus 5 Celsius. Down at the surface, you could be stuck at 0, even below freezing. And that's exactly what happened. And this is also a problem at this time of the year with regards to pollution. You probably had that in some of the bigger towns and cities, and especially London, where when you've got that that inversion layer, you then trap the particles and the pollution down at street level. It has nowhere to escape to, and then the column itself becomes quite dirty, especially day in and day out. That cold dense air just gets forced down to the surface once again with that lid over the top. So that is the reason why we had that big temperature differential. And now, if you notice, we've still got a chilly air mass across the southeast because our frontal system that's moving south has not yet moved into the southeast of England and allowed the air mass to stir, allowing the warm air aloft to then start to mix down to the surface. But we're seeing the temperatures coming down across the north. We will eventually start to see the temperatures coming up across the south. So I hope that gives you a better idea as to why we're seeing the type of setup that we're having. So of course this was the sea level pressure chart with the big temperature differential, warmer southwesterly winds, that warmth aloft mixing down to the surface, and of course we had that warmer aloft that could not penetrate the cold air underneath, and hence why we're seeing the cold temperatures both by day and by night. And as we play through the loop, what eventually happens is we start to deflate the area of high pressure across the south, and frontal systems start to move southwards over the British Isles. If we look at the 850 millibar temperature profile here, or let me see if I can get to this just real quick and go back to the current chart, because you notice here that if we look at the 850 temperature chart here, it looks very, very similar. Unfortunately, I'm not going to get what I'm looking for here. So we've got the colder air mass coming down, so we're starting to see the colder temperatures return to the north of Scotland, but average. Nothing particularly cold for, of course, this time of the year. But you notice the green colours here represent the temperatures of between plus 3 and plus 6 Celsius. but at the surface the temperatures were colder. Now, as we start to see increase in breeze, we're starting to see the temperatures coming up across the southern half of the British Isles here. What we're going to see over the next wee while here is an area of high pressure stuck to the west and southwest of the British Isles, and what we're going to have is that area of high pressure is going to send weather fronts into the northwest of the British Isles, coming in from a northwesterly direction, keeping things fresh. But we start to see a back and forth. We're going to start to pick up more of a jet stream. We're going to start to see this back and forth regime over the next week or two here. So, in fact, I want to show you here the temperature anomaly chart here for the last 14 days. So this is pretty impressive, and this shows you how cold it's been. And there is the last 14 days. So the last 2 weeks, warm across the bulk of Central and Eastern Europe, if you notice. Look at the UK and look at the south of England in particular. So a very warm opening 10 days has essentially been significantly dented, but I think that warmer than normal 10 to 15 days may have proved a little bit too strong. So the month may wind up average, slightly above average for the bulk of the British Isles here. And remember, over the last 7 days, we've seen the temperature difference becoming greater across particularly the north. Notice here how warm it is, like slightly warmer compared to normal, in fact, especially on the north coasts where you've got that southwesterly wind, and of course you've got the downslope compressional warming here with the Föhn effect. Core of cold compared to normal for the last 7 days has been right over the heart of southern England. If you notice here, we skipped to even 5 days, and you can see here that the gradient is even greater, considerably warmer than normal across the north and Ireland, UK, Northern Ireland as well. But look at this temperature difference here between north and south, quite impressive. And look at southern portions of the south and west of France has been significantly below normal, and across a large swathe stretching from southern Scotland all the way down to Spain and Portugal, we've had a below normal past 5 to 7 days, and longer than that even. So certainly very interesting stuff indeed. As we go back to the overview chart of the GFS, high pressure kind of topples its way in over the next 24 hours or so. We're going to see frosts actually returning to the north, which will be a welcome change, I'm sure, if you don't like the mild weather. But notice this area of high pressure. What happens is, with the position of it, we've got weather systems coming in over the top, and we're going to have this topsy-turvy up and down temperature regime over the next several days. Notice here weather systems focusing across the north, staying drier and more settled and relatively mild across the bulk of England, Wales, Northern Ireland and the Republic, if you notice here. And then we do have these intrusions of more northerly air with hill snow returning across the top, but then area of high pressure kind of then builds in. We see a little bit of a surge in temperature. We see clear skies, light winds by night, returning frosts, and then we've got more systems coming in. So we've got this fairly mobile, fairly up and down regime with Atlantic-driven component to that. Another system moves in. Cold winds in the backside introduces the return of hill snow once again, but nothing to write home about. And that looks as if that takes us into the first week of February. The very latest run of the GFS, notice here it builds a Scandinavian high. Very strong indeed. Easterly winds, but it's a long way out. So let's not buy and jump into this too quick. But if you look at the 850 temperatures here, we do have a bit of a beast from the east showing up on this one model here. But I'm not honing in too much on that because it's just one individual model run. But it's certainly interesting nonetheless what it's showing. And of course, we'd take into consideration what's happening within the stratosphere. I still believe we've got a fairly active, fairly back and forth start to February, mid to late February. Watch this space. I do think there's going to be cold spells during the month of February. Whether it's to do with the stratosphere, whether it's to do with other drivers out there, including the MJO, the PNA, other teleconnections, remains to be seen. Thanks for watching. Enjoy the rest of your day. I'll see you again tomorrow.